They were the kind of family you'd see in a magazine. The kind of family everyone in the small, quiet town of Maple Creek looked up to. The Hendersons, their house was always perfectly kept, a large Victorian with a wraparound porch, a garden that bloomed with possible color. Tom Henderson was a respected local doctor, known for his gentle bedside manner and his firm handshake. His wife, Clara, was the heart of the home, a volunteer at every school event, at bake sales, her smile a constant presence. Their 2 children, Leo and Mia, were the town's golden kids, excelling in sports and academics, always polite, always smiling. From the outside, a beautifully painted picture of success. Neighbors would see them on weekends, working in the yard together, laughter on the breeze. They hosted the best holiday parties, a home full of warmth, tables of good food, cheerful chatter, Clara's apple pie, legendary at every potluck. Tom was the man you'd call for advice about a cough or a cold, about life itself, a pillar of the community. By all accounts, perfect, but pictures can be deceiving. A smile can hide 1,000 unspoken words. A well-kept garden can conceal tangled, rotten roots beneath the soil. Behind closed doors, a different story unfolded. Whispers in hallways, doors slammed just a little too hard, glances that carried too much weight. The pressure to maintain the image, a silent weight, day after day. Resentment simmering like a pot about to boil over. The bonds they admired were being stretched to breaking. Soon they would snap with violence that would shatter the town's peace. The perfect family was about to become the town's darkest nightmare. The night it all came crashing down started like any other. It was a cool autumn evening. The date was October 12th. The smell of wood smoke hung in the air. At the local police station, Dispatch Officer Brenda Miles was nearing the end of a blessedly uneventful shift. The loudest sound in the room was the ticking of the clock. Then at 11:42 p.m. the silence was shattered. A call came through. But it wasn't a voice at first, it was a sound. A chilling, frantic sound of someone gasping for air, struggling to speak. Brenda's heart leapt into her throat. She leaned forward, training kicking in.
911, what's your emergency?
The gasping continued, punctuated by a sob. It was a sound that would haunt her. The voice was young, terrified, instantly recognizable. It was Leo Henderson. He was crying, words tumbling out in a panicked rush. He was talking about blood. He was talking about his parents. He said he had just gotten home. He said he found them. He couldn't make sense of it. All she could make out was the address. She knew by heart. 452 Elm Street. The Henderson house, the perfect house. The house where nothing bad ever happened. Within minutes, sirens wailed through the sleeping town. Neighbors peeked through curtains, faces etched with confusion. What could possibly be happening at the Hendersons' place? Police cars and an ambulance screeched to a halt in front of Malek St. Grand Victorian. The front door was slightly ajar, a silent, ominous invitation. For the officers on the scene, this was no longer just another house, it was a crime scene. The first officers to step inside were met with a scene of unimaginable chaos. The beautiful, pristine home they had all admired was now a place of nightmares. The elegant foyer, usually so welcoming, was in disarray. The real horror was further inside, in the heart of the home. The scene was so gruesome, so violent, that even the most seasoned veterans on the force were shaken to their core. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was something else entirely. This was personal. In the living room, surrounded by family photos, surrounded by cherished mementos, lay the bodies of Tom and Clara Henderson. The violence that had been inflicted upon them was brutal, shocking, and deeply unsettling. It spoke of a rage that was explosive and all-consuming. The picture-perfect couple, the pillars of the community, had met a terrifying end in the very place they should have been safest. The contrast between the tranquil setting and the savage nature of the crime was jarring. As detectives began the slow, grim process of piecing together what had happened, a disturbing question began to form. There were no signs of a forced entry. Nothing of value appeared to have been taken. The killer hadn't broken in. It seemed they had been let in, or perhaps they were already inside. The killer wasn't a stranger. The killer was someone who knew this family, someone who had walked these halls before, someone who had likely shared a meal at their table. The flawless facade of the Henderson family was beginning to crack, and what lay beneath was far darker than anyone could have guessed. The investigation would peel back the layers of perfection to reveal a tangled web of jealousy, resentment, and betrayal that had been hidden from view for years. The town of Maple Creek was about to learn a terrible lesson, that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are not the ones who hide in the shadows, but the ones who smile at you in the light of day, the ones you call family. On the surface, Leo and Mia Henderson were the envy of every parent in Maple Creek. They were the golden children, blessed with looks, intelligence, a seemingly effortless charm. Leo, 18, was the town's star quarterback. He had a scholarship to a state university already lined up, a bright future stretching out before him like an open road. He was confident, popular, the kind of boy who always had a friendly word for everyone he passed on the street. Mia, 17, was the artist, the quiet observer. Leo was the sun, bright and bold. Mia was the moon, mysterious, introspective. She was a gifted painter, canvases of haunting landscapes, portraits that captured depth of emotion. Straight-A student. Her name on the honor roll. Teachers praised her diligence and her quiet, thoughtful nature. To the outside world, the perfect daughter. But the pressure to be golden takes its toll. Little room for error, little room for being human. For Leo, the weight of expectation was constant. Every touchdown he scored, every A he earned on a test, the bar kept rising. He was Dr. Henderson's son. Anything less than first place was failure. He wore his confidence like armor. Underneath, a different story was brewing. Late nights, risky behaviors, a desperate need to feel something other than the crushing weight of his father's dreams. Mia felt the strain too, more quietly. Her art was her escape, the place she could express what she suppressed at home. Parents praised talent but didn't see what she painted. The sorrow in the eyes of her portraits, the storm clouds gathering in her landscapes. Behind shy smiles and polite nods, Mia was watching. She saw everything. Those things filled her with a quiet, simmering resentment, growing with each passing day. The Henderson family's perfection was like a fine piece of porcelain, beautiful to look at, but incredibly fragile. The first visible cracks began to appear in small, almost unnoticeable fissures. It started with arguments behind closed doors, that grew more frequent and more heated. The slam of a door that rattled the windows. Tom and Clara, the loving couple, were at the center of this growing discord. Their public displays of affection were a well-rehearsed performance. Tom's work as a doctor was all-consuming, his hours long and his temper short when he returned home. He demanded order, control, and perfection in his house, just as he did in his operating room. Clara, once the vibrant heart of the home, began to seem withdrawn, her famous smile looking more and more like a mask. The tension between the parents inevitably trickled down to the children. Leo, in particular, found himself clashing more and more with his father, suffocating under the pressure, began to rebel. His grades started to slip. He was caught drinking with friends after a game. Each act of defiance was met with a furious lecture from Tom, creating a cycle of rebellion and punishment that pushed them further and further apart. The golden boy was beginning to tarnish. Mia retreated further into her own world. She became the family's silent witness, observing the growing fractures from the sidelines. She heard the arguments. She saw the forced smiles. She felt the coldness that had crept into the home. Her art became darker, her subjects more tormented. She tried to show her mother one of her newer, more troubling paintings, but Clara just glanced at it, offered a distracted compliment, and changed the subject to the upcoming town bake sale. Mia felt invisible, her silent screams for help going completely unheard. The family was breaking apart, and everyone was pretending not to notice. Tom Henderson was more than just a pillar of the community. He was an institution, built his reputation on a foundation of discipline, intelligence, unwavering control. But at home, these same qualities cast a long, dark shadow over his family. The Henderson house was not a democracy, it was a dictatorship. Dr. Henderson was its unquestioned ruler. His word was law, his expectations absolute. This rigid control was most intensely focused on his son, Leo. Tom had meticulously planned Leo's life since the day he was born. He would be a top athlete. He would be a top student. He would follow in his father's footsteps and become a doctor. Tom didn't see Leo as an individual with his own dreams or desires. He saw him as a legacy project, an extension of himself. He pushed Leo relentlessly, celebrating his victories not with pride, but with a critical analysis of how he could have done even better. The love Leo received felt conditional. This relentless pressure created a deep and bitter resentment in Leo. He started to see his father not as a guide, but as a tyrant. He began to challenge his father's authority, but his rebellion grew bolder as his frustration mounted. The arguments between them became legendary within the house. Explosive confrontations left Clara in tears, Mia hiding in her room. The financial secrets were perhaps the most telling. Tom controlled the family's finances with an iron fist. Despite their apparent wealth, Clara was given a strict allowance, every penny of which had to be accounted for. When Leo asked for a car for his 18th birthday, Tom refused. He claimed it was to teach Leo the value of money, but the real reason was control. This financial strangulation was another source of fuel for the fire of resentment that was burning hotter and hotter inside the perfect house on Elm Street. While Tom's iron rule created one kind of poison in the Henderson home, Clara's secrets created another. For years, Clara had played the role of the perfect wife and mother, her life a testament to domestic bliss, but behind them, she was living a lie. The emotional distance from her husband had grown into a vast, unbridgeable chasm. He was no longer a partner. Clara was desperately lonely, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. She craved affection, attention, a connection that had long since withered in her own home. And eventually she sought it elsewhere. The secret began subtly. Friendly conversation at a school event, a lingering glance, a shared coffee that lasted too long. Soon Clara was involved in a full-blown affair. She was careful, meticulous, covering her tracks, secret cell phone, fake book club meetings, fabricated visits to sick friends. But secrets this big seep out, poisoning everything. Mia, the silent observer, was the first to suspect. Mysterious phone calls in the garden, new clothes, new perfume. Her mother's smile, genuine only when looking at her phone. Mia felt a deep betrayal. Tom controlled the finances. Another deception, disastrous investments wiped out much of the savings. He hid it from everyone, even Clara. They lived on a financial precipice, a house of cards. The pressure made Tom more controlling, more volatile. The Henderson house was a minefield of secrets. Someone was about to make a very wrong step. The first secret to detonate was Clara's. It happened not with a bang, but with a quiet, accidental click. Tom, ever suspicious, had become increasingly aware of his wife's distracted behavior. He noticed the late-night texts. He noticed the sudden errands that took hours. One evening while Clara was in the shower, her secret phone, forgotten on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a new message. He picked up the phone. He didn't know the password, but the notification on the lock screen was enough. A message from a man's name he didn't recognize, with a heart emoji next to it. It was all the confirmation he needed. The confrontation that followed was unlike any argument the house had ever heard before. It was not a shouting match. It was something colder, more terrifying. Tom presented the phone to Clara as she came downstairs. Her face a mask of confusion that quickly crumbled into pure panic. He didn't yell. He spoke in a low, controlled voice that was far more menacing than any scream. He dissected her betrayal with the precision of a surgeon. The porcelain family had just been struck with a hammer. Clara tried to explain, to apologize. She spoke of her loneliness, of his coldness. But Tom was not interested in excuses. He was interested in punishment. For him, this was not just an affair. It was the ultimate act of insubordination, a stain on his reputation, a crack in the perfect image he had so carefully constructed. He didn't file for divorce. Instead, he began a campaign of quiet psychological warfare. He cut off her access to money completely, isolating her. He would bring up the affair at random moments, twisting the knife, making it clear that she was now a prisoner in her own home. The warmth was gone, replaced by a permanent, bitter cold. The house was no longer a home, it was a battleground. And the first major casualty was the illusion of love itself. Leo watched the war between his parents with a mixture of horror and a strange, dark satisfaction. For years, he had been the sole target of his father's suffocating control and volcanic anger. Now, that focus had shifted. The foundation of his world was crumbling, and the pressure cooker that was 452 Elm Street was reaching a critical point. Leo felt the walls closing in on him. His rebellion escalated dramatically. It became more reckless, more self-destructive. He was drinking heavily, not just with friends, but alone in his room late at night. The star quarterback started showing up to practice hungover. His friends started to distance themselves. Worried by the dark turn his behavior had taken, Leo was pushing everyone away. He was a bomb, and the fuse was getting shorter every single day. The breaking point with his father was inevitable. It came after Leo was caught trying to steal a copy of a final exam at school. The principal called Dr. Henderson. He told Leo he was a disgrace, a failure. He told him the university scholarship was in jeopardy. He told him he had ruined the family name. Every word was a hammer blow. In that moment, something inside Leo snapped. Years of resentment, the constant pressure, it all coalesced into a pure, cold hatred. He looked at his father as the source of all the pain and chaos in his life. He stormed out of the room, but the apathetic rebellion was over. It was replaced by something far more dangerous, a quiet, focused rage that began to look for a solution, a final way to end the tyranny once and for all. While Leo was spiraling outwards, Mia was spiraling inwards, retreating deeper into her world of silence and observation. She saw her mother's hollowed-out eyes. She felt the palpable hatred radiating from her father. She heard Leo's muffled sobs. The house was sick, infected with a disease of secrets and anger. She moved through the tense hallways like a ghost. This invisibility became her greatest tool. One afternoon, searching for a misplaced paintbrush in her father's home office, she found the door slightly ajar. Curiosity overriding her fear, she slipped inside. On his desk, partially hidden under a stack of medical journals, was a pile of official-looking letters. The words "Final Notice" and "Account in Default" were printed in stark red ink. She began to read. The letters told a story of financial ruin. Her father had gambled away their savings, their security, everything, his control, his lectures about money. It wasn't about discipline. It was a desperate charade to hide the fact that the money was gone. His tyranny was the panicked act of a man who had lost everything and was terrified of being exposed as a fraud. She saw the web connecting all the family's miseries. Her father's financial stress made him more controlling. His control pushed her mother to have an affair. His rage was now being directed at Leo. Mia sat there, feeling the last vestiges of family loyalty turn to ice in her veins. She finally understood. The perfect family was a lie, and the lie was about to kill them. The final, fatal argument was not about one thing, it was about everything, all the secrets, all the lies, all the betrayals. It started, as it so often did, with Tom. He had discovered the full extent of Leo's academic slight. For Tom, this was the final, unforgivable failure. But this time Leo didn't shrink away, he fought back. He screamed about the affair, blaming Tom for driving Clara away. Clara rushed in and tried to intervene. Her presence only added fuel to the fire. Tom turned on her, spitting venom about her infidelity. Then Mia appeared at the top of the stairs. Quietly she descended, holding the stack of financial documents she had found in her father's office. In a voice that was eerily calm, she exposed the final, biggest secret of all. She told them about the debt, about the failed investments, about the impending foreclosure. The revelation hung in the air, a stunning final blow. Tom's face went white. His mask of authority, of control, of success was ripped away in an instant. He was exposed. The explosion was immediate. Robbed of his power and his secrets, Tom's rage turned primal. He lunged at Leo. The two of them crashed into a table, the sound of splintering wood echoing through the house. Clara screamed, trying to pull them apart, only to be shoved violently aside. The carefully constructed stage of the Henderson family was being torn apart, piece by piece. The actors had forgotten their lines, and a raw, brutal improvisation had begun. This was the point of no return. The violence was now out in the open, and it would not stop until it had consumed them all. The living room had transformed. It was no longer a space for family gatherings. It was an arena when Tom lunged with the full force of a man who had lost everything. His rage was no longer controlled or precise. He grabbed Leo by the collar of his shirt. He slammed his son against the wall. A framed family photo shook. The picture tilted crookedly. Leo, no longer the boy, but a man, fueled by a potent cocktail of resentment and alcohol. He fought back. He shoved his father with shocking strength.
You've ruined everything!
He saw in Leo not a son, but the living embodiment of his own colossal failure, a mirror reflecting the fraud he had become. The struggle was clumsy and brutal, not choreographed. A desperate, ugly clawing for dominance. They crashed into furniture. A lamp toppled over. He grabbed the heaviest object he could reach, a thick glass award from the mantelpiece. He raised it high above his head, a point of no return. A line crossed in blood and fury. Leo saw the object coming. He saw the unhinged look in his father's eyes. His survival instinct took over. He ducked and lunged forward, tackled his father around the waist. They fell to the floor in a heap. The glass award shattered against the stone fireplace hearth. The sound like a gunshot. The fight was no longer about words or disappointment. It had descended into something primal, something lethal. The question was no longer who would win the argument, but who would walk away. Clara watched the scene unfold with a horror that froze her to the spot. Tom, his face red and slick with sweat, didn't even seem to hear her. His hands were now around Leo's throat, squeezing with a terrifying strength. Clara saw the life draining from her son's eyes, and a switch flipped inside her. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for anything. Her gaze fell upon the heavy brass fireplace poker resting in its stand. Without a second thought, she grabbed it. The metal was cold and heavy in her trembling hands. In that split second, Clara Henderson made a choice. She was no longer the perfect wife. She was a mother watching her child die. She raised the heavy poker. She swung the poker with all the force she could muster. The sound that followed was not the clean crack of splintering wood or shattering glass. It was a sickening, dull thud that would echo in that house, and in her mind, forever. Mia stood frozen on the stairs, a silent spectator to the destruction she had unleashed. She had thought that revealing the truth would be a release. She had been naive. She had lit the fuse, and now she was watching the bomb detonate in the heart of her family. From her vantage point, she saw it all with a horrifying clarity. She saw her father's face, that she saw her brother Leo struggling for breath. When her mother swung the poker, Mia flinched. The sound was wet and final. Her father's grip on Leo loosened instantly. He slumped to the side. Clara, panting, stood over him, but the horror was not over. Leo, gasping for air and wild-eyed with adrenaline and rage, scrambled free. The chaos was not finished. It was just changing shape. Mia wanted to scream, but she was rooted to the spot. She was no longer just an observer. She was an accomplice. She watched as her mother dropped the poker. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. In that moment, the 3 remaining family members were frozen in a tableau of pure horror. The silence that fell over the room was heavier and more terrifying than the shouting had ever been, but the silence was broken by a new, chilling sound. A gurgle. Tom wasn't dead. In that moment, Leo saw not his father, but a thread that was not yet extinguished. What happened next was not a choice, but a reaction. He lunged for a shard of the heavy glass award that had shattered against the fireplace. It was jagged and sharp. Clara. No. He didn't hesitate. He knelt over his father. Clara screamed. But it was too late. The adrenaline, the years of rage, the terror of the last few minutes, it all guided Leo's hand. The final act was swift and brutal. When it was over, he scrambled back. He looked at his mother, his eyes wide with a horror that mirrored her own. They had done it. Together they had killed him. Emma choked sob. Mia, still on the stairs, finally found her voice. A single choked sob escaped her lips. The sound seemed to break the spell. Leo looked up and saw his sister. Then he looked at his mother. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. The perfect house on Elm Street was now a tomb. The 3 survivors were bound together not by love, but by a terrible, bloody secret. The silence that followed was the silence of the grave. When police first arrived at 452 Elm Street, they found a scene of pure, unadulterated chaos. 3 survivors huddled together in the aftermath of the storm. Clara, the grieving widow, Leo, the terrified son, and Mia, the silent, shell-shocked daughter. Their initial story was simple, tragic, and seemingly plausible. They told the detectives about a home invasion. They spoke of masked intruders, a robbery gone horribly, violently wrong. Leo, his voice still hoarse, was the primary storyteller. He recounted waking up to strange noises. He described a desperate struggle. He said he had been knocked unconscious. Clara, wrapped in a blanket and shaking uncontrollably, corroborated his story through her tears. She whispered about the men's deep, angry voices. But even in those first few hours, a seasoned detective, a man named Frank Miller, felt a small nagging sense of doubt. Something about the story felt rehearsed. There were no signs of forced entry in any of the doors or windows, which was the first red flag. And why would robbers inflict such personal overkill level brutality? It felt less like a robbery and more like an execution born of pure rage. Detective Miller kept his thoughts to himself, but he made a note. The story was clean, a little too clean. While Leo was the voice of the family's story and Clara was its emotional heart, Mia was its silent, unnerving question mark. In the initial interviews, she barely spoke. The doctors at the hospital called it acute trauma. Detective Miller wondered if it was something else. He tried a different approach. He assigned a female officer to sit with Mia. Davis didn't ask about the intruders or the attack, but then Davis asked about her paintings. And for the first time, a flicker of something appeared in Mia's eyes. A single tear traced a path down her pale cheek. The police, meanwhile, were running into dead ends. The forensic analysis was yielding strange results. The only clear fingerprints and DNA belonged to the 4 members of the Henderson family. The lack of evidence was in itself a powerful piece of evidence. Detective Miller's suspicion grew. He reviewed the 911 call. He noticed something. Leo never mentioned intruders on the call. He just said he found them. The story of the home invasion had been constructed later. He knew the truth wasn't outside the house. He knew the truth was locked away, right there behind Mia Henderson's silent, terrified eyes. The break in the case came from an unexpected place. It came from the medical examiner's report. The medical examiner identified two distinct patterns of injury. The attack wasn't a single event, it was two separate assaults. It suggested two different attackers, or perhaps two people within the house reacting in a frenzy. He also noted the bruising on Leo's neck. It was shaped like fingerprints,